Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mark Maynard, and I'm pleased to welcome you to the Washington Labs Academy webinar series. We hope you find the next hour useful and informative. We have developed monthly international approval webinars to deal with some of the technical and administrative issues that our customers face when obtaining global marketplace product approvals for electronics and electrical devices. We recognize that compliance engineering and certification challenges can be complex, and we're always looking for ways to support our customers. Before we begin, I want to go over a few housekeeping details. First, I hope everyone can see the slides on your computer. We have muted everyone's microphone to keep the quality as high as possible. We have muted everyone's microphone during the meeting, and at the end we'll be taking questions from the Q&A feature on the WebEx. The recording presentation is underway and will be sent to all registrants and attendees. A full screen view may be preferred. To select View and Full Screen, then you can use Escape to return to normal view. As I mentioned, you can use chat or the Q&A function to submit your questions during the webinar, and at the end we'll go back and look through them and answer as many as possible as time permits. We'd like to hear from you. You can see contact information here, and at the end of the presentation, you will also be receiving a PDF copy of the slide deck that contains the same information. You can reach out to us via email at academy@wll.com or directly to me at markm@wll.com. Estimate the presentation will take about 45 minutes with time left for questions at the end. First, a little about me. I'm the Training and Business Development Manager at Washington Labs Academy. I also have a dual role, an American certification body for the international approvals and business development. I've worked in the compliance engineering and RF engineering fields for over 30 years in such areas as EMC, EMI, wireless telecom, product safety, design for the environment, and quality management systems. I am a senior member of the IEEE and heavily involved with the Product Safety Engineering Society and the EMC Society. Just a little bit of vocabulary if you're not familiar with this international approval series. We'll be talking about local representatives or local reps. These are for countries where it's required that you have an official company representative on the ground. And want to make sure that you can that the authorities have someone they can go to in the event of a urgent need to contact the manufacturer. The GDP PPP is a gross domestic product on a purchasing power basis, and this is a economic indicator of the disposable income in the country and how good a marketplace it might make for you. It's one of the things you can use to rank it along with the infrastructure for mobile cellular and internet usage, which is also shown on the title slide for each country. And then the population, so based on the GDP, PPP, and the population, you can get an idea of, if the population is in line with the same ranking as the GDP, then it's probably a pretty good marketplace. If the GDP is higher than the population ranking, it means it's higher than average economic infrastructure there. And if it's lower, that may not be a great market for consumer electronics or other not necessary devices. So credit where credit is due. All the maps and flags and other demographic information I provided here that I just mentioned comes from the CIA World Factbook. It's a open website available for use information there, free use as long as you give a credit to the Central Intelligence Agency website. And so that's what I'm doing with this page here. You can get a link there if you want to do some research on your own. And the World Factbook, so we got a lot of good information there. So today, there are a few more countries, smaller countries, mainly along the northern side of South America, but I'm going over the 10 largest in terms of land size and economic production. And just going through them alphabetically, but I will give some ranking information as we go through each one. So 6 of these countries in the top 50. There's overall there's about 200 something countries ranked by the CIA according to theirs, and the exact number differs depending on which whoever's making the listing. But you know, top 50 GDPs, those are really prime markets to be in. If you're just starting your global expansion, you can go into the World Factbook and get a listing of those based on their economies. And so those 6 countries in top 50 for Latin America are the ones you're probably real familiar with: Brazil, Argentina, Colombia, Chile, Peru, and Venezuela. And not coincidentally, these are the 6 countries also have the most robust infrastructure for regulatory compliance there. Ecuador, Bolivia, and Uruguay are between the next 50 up to 100, and Paraguay is ranked 103rd. So basically, you got 10 countries in the top 40% of the world's economy, so it's probably good if you're expanding to South America to start with this list. A lot of them are really expanding their communication IT infrastructure as the world becomes more entwined with the sharing of information and the resources available there. They want to be on that same boat, and so they're really developing that. You know, be aware that in this region, though, that you know some of the economies and the political establishments are maybe there's always possibility for changes. It's good to pay attention to news and see what's going on there, and if you might have additional issues if you're importing products in those countries for sale. So we'll start off with Argentina. The agency there is INACOM. You probably knew previously the CNC. That was revised a few years ago. They formed a new agency, and this is kind of common in Latin America. They'll just come up, instead of just reforming the agency, they'll develop a whole new one, and that's what they've done in Argentina. The GDP PPP is 29th, and making it the second wealthiest in terms of GDP PPP in South America. And then you see that GDP PPP is slightly higher than their population ranking, so this means a pretty robust economy. Mobile cellular 24th, internet users 25th, all ranking above the population, so that means that there's more mobile cellular devices per person and more internet users per person in that country than the average. As mentioned previously, CNC, so they require mandatory approvals for anything that connects to the wired telephone lines, the telephone infrastructure, the central office phone equipment, or anything that uses RF spectrum for transmission information. As you're probably aware, the spectrum within each country is a resource, just like any minerals or oil or anything that might be found there. They get to dictate exclusively what's allowed for use and not allowed for use. There is some cooperation through international organizations that attempt to standardize this, but there's are differences between what's allowed and what's not allowed, so you need to make sure that you're checking your frequency of your product, that it is something that's going to be allowed in, in that country. And you know, things like Wi-Fi, especially in the 5 gigahertz, there may be some restrictions in certain bands that they reserve for military or other emergency communications like police or fire. They do have a very informative website. As mentioned, it's a new agency. It's in Spanish, and this is the case for most of them. They're all Spanish-speaking, with the exception of Brazil, which speaks Brazilian Portuguese, and that's related back to when they were colonized by different European powers in the 1600s and 1700s. Most of them were colonized by Spain, so the Spanish language is the official language there, and then Brazil was settled by the Portuguese, and so Portuguese language is one there. Google Translate is very useful. You're probably aware of it, but don't rely on these for official translations. If you're trying to enter in a standard, that's not going to be an official translation, so make sure you're getting it from an official source. They do provide their standards in Spanish on the website, and I've provided a link there. Normatives or norms is another word used for standards that you will see in Europe and other countries in the world. Certification process, you've got to have a local importer there, and they're the ones that actually submit the paperwork. So this could be If you have a branch office there, somebody from your branch office. If you don't have a presence in Argentina, you'll need to hire a local rep, and they'll be authorized in a manner similar to like a notary public would authorize someone in the U.S. to act on behalf of a company in a legal authority as a legal representative. It's the same thing it will happen to have in Argentina. It's got to be tested under current INTICOM regulations. The grandfathering period from CNC is over, so everything, for the most part, it was the standards are the same one used. They've just been updating them with the new agency name on them. And they don't accept foreign test reports for GSM cellular technology from FCC or the CE Red reports. And there's multiple in-country test laboratories, so you have lots of choices there. We have 3 certification schemes in Argentina. Homologation, that's the normal type approval that you're probably used to for most of your worldwide wireless approvals or telecom approvals. And that's just you're showing that you've got a test report, you're in formal compliance with the applicable standards, the agency can verify it. Codification is usually for things that don't have standards available, maybe a new technology, so they may say, okay, you can test it to this standard that's available on the from the Europeans or others. Close that out so we'll stop thinking. Sorry, I'm trying to shut off my speaker there. Didn't know that was still running. And then authorization. So this is usually for a one-off. Maybe in a factory you're putting in one particular setup that you're not going to be duplicating selling. It's just for one particular installation, and so they'll bring in, they have range for in-house testing, and it's not allowed for things that you're going to commercialize and sell multiple copies of. It's probably something for your factory or some other facility you've got there. It's just going to be a one-time thing. Marking requirements, they do require the INTICOM registration number and serial number, so that's the your product serial number is normally something you're going to have on the product, so that's not anything additional, but the INTICOM and with the RN certification number, and then the model number and the company name, we're assuming are also on your product label already, so that's not anything additional. The certs are good for 3 years, assuming no product changes. If you do change the product, you've got to resubmit for approval. It takes about 8 weeks start to finish. In-country test reports about 1 to 2 weeks, and then the administrative paperwork stuff at the INTICOM agency is about 4 to 6 weeks. So, we're looking at a maximum of 8 weeks normally. It does get stacked up from time to time, like around, ahead of the Christmas selling season or the back to school season, so make sure you're timing these to allow enough time to get them through. There's 7 steps for the review process, typical to most agencies, so they're just going to go through and they're interested in verifying that things are stacked up. This is mainly for use for your third party or your local rep who may be doing it, but I've just got in there so you can kind of see the path there that it goes through for the submittals. Usually, certificate renewal, if the product hasn't changed, there's no additional testing needed, and you can start at 30 days before. I'd actually recommend you start 60 days before, because you don't want to be in a situation where you've reached the end of certificate life and you haven't got your new one, so you have to stop shipment. And it's about 4 to 6 weeks. You can update it, the technical file at any time, but the CNC is not going to issue a new certificate. They'll just amend their documentation and issue a formal letter saying that it was updated. Everything else will stay the same. If you have multiple importers, each one's got to have their own unique certificate, so that means they have their own unique test report, and so each one of them has got to range for that. It can't use the same report for multiple importers. Each one has to have their own. There's one kind of thing, one kind of glitchy thing about Argentina, but if you've got multiple importers, it's not a real common situation I've run into, but it can happen. IRAM is a product safety authority. They do recognize CB scheme reports as long as they've got it in the Argentina specific things for current and voltage. They've got a pretty informative website in Spanish, and they cover almost everything, you know, up to 1,000 volts AC or 1,500 DC. And typical, you know, comparable to what we have in the U.S. as far as that, except their voltages and currents are a little bit different, 220 volts and 50 hertz. And they've got typically you go type certification, which is what a lot of companies need. They have MARC certification, which is more in line with the CE scheme. Then lot certification, if you're sending in one light, get it approved one at a time. You know, might take a sample out, and that's not something you normally see happening for electronic products. And here's some more information on type certification, lot certification for those. And the different marks, you'll see that the you know, different types of marking there. SKU number 4 type test, as I mentioned, is probably the most common one you're going to see, and they're going to take the CB cert, record a sample, and if you're just wanting to go to Argentina, you can get a local one, but it's in your best interest probably get with the CB scheme and do that. As I mentioned, they do have a little bit different plug requirements. If you notice it here, they've got this angled plug. It's different from a lot of other countries, and so they've got specific requirement. That cord and power set has to be supplied with the system. You have to supply that. It can't be something you're requiring the customer to go purchase themselves, because then you can't guarantee it's set for the right, you know, tolerances for your piece of equipment, for the current draw and all that kind of thing. Bolivia, a little smaller country. Their PDP rank is 93rd. Population rank is the 81st. So you see the economy's probably a little bit below average in terms of GDP. But they do have a pretty good infrastructure, cellular and internet usage, and probably be a second-tier country if you're going in different levels, you know, phasing out your product or phasing in your product in different groups. The ATTs are a telecommunications body, and they have Spanish language website available. They don't require local testing. You just use your FCC reports and grants or your RED compliance report. I just noticed I didn't catch that one, but it's a CE RED now. The radio equipment directive has replaced the RNTTE, and so all your reports now have to be RED reports, the radio equipment directive for the European Union. They don't require a local rep, but you have to have an agent that's registered with ATT agency to make the application. So that could be somebody from your company. Brasil, or Brazil as we call it, is the largest economy in South America, 9th in the world in terms of GDP, PPP. Population ranks at 5th, mobile cellular 6th, internet usage 5th, and that's why there's such an attractive market. You probably heard you know, a lot of things about BRIC being Brazil, Russia, India, and China. These are the 4 countries identified as having real high growth, real productive markets there for electronic and electrical products. And so it's, you know, as you're phasing out, this would probably be the first country you want to go to in South America. There's 2 agencies there, and Metro publishes their standards, but they're also oversee the product safety requirements. There are some products that have a requirement, mandatory requirement for product safety, others are voluntary, and that will depend on. The most voluntary requirement usually means it's a marketing requirement, like the big government agencies and maybe some large corporations will require it. But Anatel is definitely required for anything connected to telephone infrastructure or anything that communicates wirelessly. And so we'll take a look at those 2 agencies. Brazil has the most developed compliance infrastructure and organizations. Anatel has a Portuguese language website. They do have a English level language, but this has mainly this real overview of the agency. There's no technical information available on the English level, so any of the technical stuff is going to be Portuguese language. Google Translate does a pretty decent job on it, but as I mentioned, don't rely on that to just translate your standards. You've got to get official translated standards if you're going to use those. And so they use a thing called OCD. You can think of these like the FCC TCBs, a designated certification body. It's accredited by Anatel, just like FCC oversees the program that NIST runs to accredit TCBs in the United States. So You've got to be one of these OCDs. And, you know, if you go into somebody and say, "Oh, we can do all your testing," they've got to be one of the OCDs that are going to have to use a test lab that's been authorized by a metro, like NIST authorizes TCBs. But anyways, it's kind of the structure. The third-party certification partner, that would be, you know, somebody like Washington Labs is acting on your behalf to get those, and then these different things. Anitel's the agency, then you have the manufacturer. It's kind of the chain they go through. So your OCD is kind of in charge of the whole thing. You have a local rep that's required there. You have to have authorized test lab and a registered translator for any, you know, for your user guides and things. The CANGS one is about the barcode, which we'll talk about in a minute. It goes on the label, but which is becoming optional. Two-type certificate. So homologation, that's your, you have to have both of these. Is issued by Anitel, and it doesn't have an expiration date. An OCD, so the OCD you've chosen to go to, they're going to issue a technical certificate, and it's going to have a expiration date depending on the type of products, and maybe from 1 to 3 years, depending on how often they need to review it. So there's 3 different categories of equipment. Category 1 is the most common for general public. You know, this is your consumer electronics, things that the general public can be using. Category 2 is stuff that's not normally going to be a consumer product, your antennas, your amplifiers. Some things are like Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, it's real standardized. And category 3 is going to be like your cables, network data equipment, and switches, hubs, routers, those kinds of things that a consumer isn't normally going to be using. So here's a look at an Anitel homologation certificate example. And what it looks like is not expiration date on it. It's issued to the local rep and has to remain there in country with the local rep. And then the OCD, it also has to be obtained from the OCD you selected as your product certifier, and it's going to be issued to the manufacturer, but you also want your local rep to have a copy of this. Required document list for manufacturer, this put in here shows it's like almost every other agency in the world. They want the technical specification brochure. You know, it's kind of your theory of operation stuff, like the block diagram, what it does, what it can do, internal photos, external photos, regulatory label, mock-up. You know, the user manuals in Portuguese, and that's Brazilian Portuguese, which is different than Portugal Portuguese, so make sure you're using an authorized translator for Brazilian Portuguese for these manuals. So your regulatory sheet in Portuguese, or any of the regulatory notices have to definitely be in Portuguese, any warnings. And then the factory ISO certificate, and with this translated Brazilian Portuguese. So your local rep authorization letter is mentioned, so your local rep has to have that letter issued in Brazil that legally ordains them to act on your behalf. To set up instructions and samples, so they'll know how to set up and test it. And then required documentation local rep, they're going to provide warranty form, the EAN, that's your barcode, Brazilian tax ID, so that's a company entity tax ID. EAN letter, it's just saying you're authorized to use that barcode, and the social contract is just saying that you're going to behave yourself and not put unsafe products on the market, and recall if you're ordered to do so. The typical test standards, in most cases, it's just one sample. But if you notice down here at the bottom, if you're doing batteries, this is why we always recommend use a battery manufacturer that already has an approved battery pack. Don't make something that you have to specially make a battery pack for your system, because that process is expensive. You see 54 samples battery pack, and it's long. So it's always best to use already approved, already a proven battery pack if that's required for your product. So we're speaking about the Anitel product label. So there's barcode. They're supposed to be going away, making it optional that it can be in the user guide, and no longer will have to be on the product. You'll have to check, make sure that your particular product that applies to, and it's just the EAN code, that things it has to adhere to. Label doesn't have to be in color. It can be black and white or monotone. So you do have to do in-country testing. You change your product, or if there's a during your original submittal, you failed one of the MC tests, and if product safety requirements are applicable, and regulations change. So documents for renewal, product samples required for testing is required. You'll need new internal and external photos, and declaration letter confirming no modifications. And METRO is the Brazilian National Institute of Metrology, Quality, and Technology, and so they set the standards, publish the standards, and you can get to the website in English. It has a lot of good information there, and there's also the Portuguese version, I guess, obviously. They have mandatory certification equipment you can get from that website. There's 80 products. I've listed some of the most common ones for our customers there. There's also, as mentioned, a voluntary certification. So these are things like, lights and switches and consumer electronics IT equipment. These aren't required, but a lot of companies will go ahead and obtain them just for from a liability protection standpoint, make sure the products are safe and proven safe by a third party. And there's 8 different certification schemes, but most are going to use the type test, you'll see in that first category. So there's just different options you can go through, but most will be the Model 1 type. So METRO has a lot simpler structure than Anatel. So you've got an OCP, similar to OCDs that we use for Anatel. And then your test lab has to be authorized by METRO, and then the third-party certification partner is obtaining on your behalf. And then I've provided a listing to their accredited OCPs and also the test laboratories. In METRO, if I didn't mention, also authorizes all the authorized test laboratories for both Anatel and METRO. And this is what they're marking. If you got a product that is mandatory testing, this is what the label looks like, and it has that accreditation code, type accreditation, and provided by the METRO agency. Next, we'll look at Chile, and they have 2 different agencies that look at Subtel is for all the wireless and telecom. SEC is mainly for certain products, and it has a lot to do with chemicals also, but there are a few electrical components that fall under that. So they're on the west coast of South America, population around 65th, and so GDP is 45th, so that means they're really producing there economically. And their mobile, cellular, and internet usage are ranked higher than population, which means they got more per person, mobile cellular use and internet users in their country. So it's a very good market there for electronics. And here's a link to their website, and they set the standards, but they will accept FCC or CE Radio Equipment Directive or RAD test reports as proof of compliance. And anything connects to the network, anything that communicates wirelessly. Local rep's not required, factory inspection not required, so it's pretty straightforward getting approvals. It's a paperwork exercise basically with your FCC or CE reports. There's not a product label requiring, except for those that require SAR, that's specific absorption rate. That's for personal devices that are worn on the body, like a cell phone, close to the head or chest. So they have those things, like cell phones, have to have that SAR testing. If it does, then it's got to have that SAR approval code on it so they can trace it to the test results. Certs don't have any expiry dates. There's no renewals as long as the product doesn't change. It takes about 4 to 6 weeks. Same type of stuff you would expect. So it's this paperwork exercise mission. You're going to have your reports, photos, user manuals in Spanish, and as I mentioned, no label requirements for those that require SAR testing. Now, SEC has different products of mandatory testing. Combustible products, we're mainly talking about, like things like gas and fuel and all that. So it's not going to apply to most of what we're doing, but electrical products, it's mainly lighting, tools, rotating electrical machines, so anything that's got a motor on it, basically electric motor on it, is going to fall under that. And they've got certification bodies there, and if your products are in that category, then you'll need to follow up with that. But for most of our customers, it's not. And there are 7 different types of schemes. Scheme 1 is one most are going to be doing. It's a type test, but there are options that might fit your particular situation better. Colombia, GDP, PDP is 32nd and in line with its population rank 29th, and Mobile cellular internet users are slightly above average for mobile cellular and right in line with internet usage according to their population. And so the CRC is their Telecom Regulatory Commission. This is a new logo, same agency. Before it wasn't really a logo, they just used stylized CRC. And Spanish language website. And so basically voluntary approvals. But if you have a large government contract or large corporation requiring it, you can get these approvals. FCC or CE reports can be used as proof of compliance. And so mobile handsets do have a mandatory requirement, and so you'll have to obtain those for those, but other types of electronics don't. And SAR testing, they do have requirements for that, so you'll have to go through SAR testing, accept the FCC SAR test reports for that. And here's some the typical standards that they use, and you can kind of see here the referencing to the FCC tests that cover it. And so if you provide those particular FCC reports, then there's no testing required there, just handing over reports and paperwork. Next, we're going to look at Ecuador. Population GDP both ranked 67th, mobile cellular 69th, internet user at 51st, so looks like a good market there. It's a smaller country, but pretty stable. It's Arcatel. This is a new agency, Agency for Regulation and Control of Telecommunications, and they have a Spanish language website. They do have exemption for radio devices below 50 milliwatts EIRP, or for anything that's, or it's an involuntary approval, basically, for anything below there. So anything higher than that level is mandatory testing. So you've got to have a either FCC report and grant or EU RED reports to show compliance. They don't do factory inspections or local company rep product labeling, so it's pretty straightforward paperwork exercise with your FCC or CE reports to get those approvals. Paraguay, from the 10 countries we're looking at, is ranked 103rd, so it's kind of the bottom of the list is economically for those 10 countries. But if you're wanting to, in the 10 top markets there, this will be included in South America. And, population ranking is right in line with the GDP, PDP. Internet usage is a little bit higher than average. Mobile cellular right in line. And they've got a new logo, but it's the same Conatel agency. Good website in Spanish. As I mentioned previously, Google Translate's good for translating most of that. They don't require local testing. They'll cut the FCC or CE RED reports as proof of compliance. I'll get that corrected to RED before I send out the slide deck today. No factory inspection required, but they want the FCC mark or CE mark, depending on what report you use as proof of compliance, so they can trace it to that. Takes about 8 to 10 weeks. Certs are good for 5 years. If you're still selling that product after 5 years, you can get it renewed. But if cert expires, you can't sell it until you've got a valid cert again. Peru, GDP, PDP is 47th, population ranked 43rd, mobile cellular 39th, 42nd for internet users, so it looks like a pretty good market there. So the Ministry of Transport and Communication is the regulatory authority there, Spanish language website, and they do have mandatory requirements for telecom, anything that connects to the central office equipment, telephone exchanges, and anything that communicates wirelessly. They don't have local reps or in-country testing. They're going to use those FCC or Industry Canada reports as proof of compliance. Kind of different from our other countries, but they've got strong links with their North American training partners, and so that's what they use. They do require, whether if you're using FCC or IC, whichever one you're using, that marking is going to be on a product label so they can trace it back to that report. And then these are permanent renewals as long as the product doesn't change. If They do have exemption for output power transmit below 10 milliwatts and operates in an unlicensed band, then that's a voluntary approval. You need to compare that against your bands you're using. And the kind of the two different paths, assuming most companies are going to have FCC or IC test reports, or definitely going to have FCC reports. So it'd be a paperwork exercise in that case, just with lists there. And they don't issue certificates, they just publish it on their website. And but your importer's going to need that MTC registration number once it's posted on the website to get your products through customs. Uruguay, ranked 96 in GDP, PDP, and that's well above their population ranking of 133rd. So economically, they're producing. And mobile cellular use, internet use is above average. So it looks like an attractive market there for a smaller country. And they've got 3 agencies you have to deal with. And all these links I've provided the agencies were just verified this morning, so they should all be working still when you get a chance to look at them. So the unit has to do with basically, electrical stuff like, cables, switches, lights, office equipment, stuff like that. So they do have requirements for label marking and user manuals and warnings have to be in Spanish. You don't need a local rep. There's no in-country testing. They can use CB reports or to show proof of compliance. That's a CB scheme. The international consortium that allows one test report to be used for multiple countries. If you're not familiar with that, just Google CB scheme and get to the official site and you'll find lots of information there. Your sec is for wireless stuff, and Antel, not Anatel like Brazil, but Antel is mandatory for the phone network system, the hardwired stuff that connects to the phone infrastructure. So there's no label requirements, no factory inspections. You've got to have Spanish warnings in there, no local rep, no in-country testing. So they're going to rely on your FCC reports as proof of compliance or CE reports. And one more instance that I should have changed RNTTE to red. I apologize for that, but I'll get it corrected for us in the slide deck. But either FCC or RNTTE reports will be accepted. And Antel is where you're going to take your telephone equipment to and using FCC or CE reports. Venezuela, population ranked 42nd, GDP, PDP is 48th, so economically a little less than average, but they've got a good infrastructure of mobile cellular and internet users. Even though they're experiencing a little bit of political instability at the moment, they seem to be more or less cranking it out there. So the Conatel telecom agency is their national authority for that. And they accept FCC or CE red reports as proof of compliance. They don't have local rep requirements or factory inspection requirements. They don't do require label marking either, but they want that FCC or CE mark on there depending which report you're using as proof of compliance. And here's some of the specific laws that relate to how the countries have to be set up for importing devices and the legal authority for getting them in there. Venezuela is kind of sticklers for imports and customs, so you need to make sure you're following all the requirements and have all your certifications in place. Here's the products of the mandatory requirements. So you see mobile phones, cell phones, TVs, terminal receivers, so basically all your IT infrastructure stuff. Non-regulated, so these are bands that you don't have to get approvals for. So you'll notice that they are certain bands that are allowed unregulated. And if your products fall in there, you'll need to get some more information from your compliance partner on that. Same type of documentation you require for most agencies in the world. Your reports, your diagram, your theory of operation, and all that kind of stuff. They also don't issue certificates they posted on their website. And here's kind of the additional notes that you're going to get a stamp receipt when they receive it, so that's good to know that it's been officially received from your agent. And you can look on the website for approvals, and there's no need for updates as long as your product doesn't change. So in South America, last month we went through Central America and the Caribbean, and before that we went through the Canada, U.S., Mexico, so we've made it all the way down to the Americas, to our southern neighbors. There seems to be a lot of frequent updated requirements there, so you want to stay informed and stay in touch to see what's going on. Find your knowledgeable, experienced partners to help you out there if you don't have your own in-house expertise. Sometimes political and social instability can prevent some challenges. So look at your risk versus rewards. Does it make sense for your products to be in this market? If you're a consumer electronic, for a nice-to-have product, do they have enough consumer, spending power there to have your product in there? Does it make sense for it? Industry affinity groups like the IEEE, Telecommunications Certification Body Council, ITU, that's the International Consortium of Telecom Authorities that I was talking about, where they try to standardize things. These are all good to belong to and get information from, so you can stay on top of the changes. So now let me look at the questions here. Let's see. How's Venezuela in the top 50 with the current situation they are facing? Well, it's just based on the pure numbers. I know there may be some difficulties getting in there. Some of that, political and societal uncertainty is going on right now. But economically, based on their gross domestic product per person parity, they are ranked in the top 50. And I know there's a lot of shortages and things like that there. So this would be a case, if I'm, looking at anything, I'm probably going to be hesitant in a market like that, where I'm going to have questions about, is the rioting going on? Is there resentment against, my country in going in there? Is this the right time to introduce a product there? So that's a decision your company's going to have to face. If you're selling something that's necessary, like maybe osmosis water filter or something like that, there's probably still a market for it, but it just depends on what you got. Another question, is there any movement to create a South American economic union that would allow simplification and certification requirements? I would be all for that, but based on the lack of cooperation that has gone on historically, I don't really see it happening anytime soon, but it'd be great if it does, if anybody's seen information on that. But I haven't seen any real cooperation other than maybe country to country, that are dealing with countries on their borders, but that's not, those things I've seen are more with transportation. I haven't seen anything along the electronic compliance. So another question, Brazil sales team believes Intel homologation for devices with Wi-Fi Bluetooth interfaces is only necessary when such interfaces require operation, including laptops, for example. If true, where are the requirements can this be found? That is not true. If you provide a capability in your system for Wi-Fi or Bluetooth that can be utilized, it's got to be tested. If it's in there, it's got to be tested. Any wireless device that's embedded in your equipment qualifies. So it doesn't matter if you're saying you're just turning it off. It needs to not be there. So if you've got embedded Wi-Fi, unless you've got some way to make sure that it'll never be utilized in that country, it's got to be receive Anatel approval for Brazil. Okay, that's all I'm seeing on Q&A. And now let me look at the chat feature here, see if we got anything there. Okay, we got a few here. This question, what IEEE group would be good to get connected to regional compliance information for telecom? The best group I found is the EMC, Electromagnetic Compatibility Society. They have, especially at their symposiums, they have a lot of presentations and information and publications on telecom and wireless requirements. Also, the Product Safety Engineering Society, believe it or not, their annual symposium is now called the Product Compliance Engineering Symposium, and they cover not just product safety, but EMC, wireless, and environmental, military privileges. So they really cover a wide spectrum. So I found those two IEEE groups to be the most useful in terms of getting compliance engineering information. That's the EMC Society and the Product Safety Engineering Society. And you can go to IEEE.org and then look for where they list all societies, and they'll have the links to those, and you can see others. Others have lots of specific technical, electronic, theory information, but not so much on the compliance, which has more to do with the legal requirements. Okay, that's all the questions. Let me do one more check on Q&A. But that's all I'm seeing there today. I appreciate you joining me today, and want to invite you to join us again. If you need more information on today's presentation, you can contact me this email. If you've got a project you'd like to get started for South America or anywhere in the world, contact Washington Labs. Here's one of the events I was just talking about. EMC Symposium in the U.S. is going to be July 30th to August 3rd in Long Beach, California. You can go right to this website and get registered. You can also find your local IEEE chapter meetings, and from this link here is provided. And also there's the IEEE website, or you can contact me if you want some more information. Also, I'd like to invite you to join us next month. I guess we just had the one July 12th, but August 9th, we're going to have China compliance, and September 13th, Japan compliance. So you can sign up at this website. Link is given here, and you'll also be receiving emails, and you'll be receiving the PDF slide deck of today's presentation with a couple of corrections on it, and you also receive a link to the recording of today's presentation you want to rewatch it, or any of your colleagues want to see it. Thank you for your time and attending today. I appreciate your support, and let me know anytime I can help out. That's all we've got for today, and I hope to see you here next month. Thank you.